So my patron Joaquin asked me to respond to this clip. So here we have a gentleman, Kyle, who is a victim of the radical traditionalist movement, and he left the true Church of Jesus Christ because of it. The Eastern Orthodox Church is a true and valid apostolic church. They have valid apostolic succession and valid sacraments. So, just like the Assyrian Church of the East, just like the Oriental Orthodox Church, and just like the Catholic Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church is the church that was founded by Jesus Christ. Oh, I get it. Is this supposed to be like me contradicting myself? Oh, well, you know what? I can actually see how this could confuse people, so I'm glad this was brought up. So, yeah, it's true that the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Oriental Orthodox Church, and the Assyrian Church of the East, they are valid churches. They have valid apostolic succession, meaning they have valid sacraments, so they are true valid churches at the local level. However, none of those churches can claim to actually be the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, because the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church is identified by the leader of the Universal Church, who is the successor of the Apostle Peter, the unique successor of the Apostle Peter, who is the Bishop of Rome, because Peter died in Rome and that's where he discharged the fullness of his authority. So his successors in Rome are the ones who are the markers of the visible church. So if you want to be part of the visible church, the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, you have to be united with the visible head of the church, and that is St. Peter and his successors, the popes. So there is no contradiction here. They are true, valid churches in the same way that Sedevacantists have valid sacraments and Old Catholics have valid sacraments. The Orthodox have valid sacraments too, but having valid sacraments, that isn't enough to be the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. So Father Michael O'Loughlin, he thinks that in order for the Catholic and Orthodox schism to be healed, it's his opinion that the Catholic Church, the Latin Church, is going to have to remove the Filioque from the creed.
Now, that's his opinion, and who knows, that actually might work. Maybe if the Latin Church removes the Filioque from the creed, maybe that will lead to reunification.
What is not happening? Reunification? Is that what this guy meant? Not happening, the reunification? Because it actually is happening. It's been happening for as long as the schism has been a thing. There have been particular Eastern churches that have been slowly coming back into communion with the Catholic Church. So it actually is happening.
I actually don't think that that's necessary when you consider the fact that the Filioque was in the Latin Creed for 600 years, and the Eastern Christians never complained about it. They never said anything about it. 600 years, no one ever batted an eye. It was never an issue. So if they were able to go 600 years without it being controversial, the Latins should be able to keep the Filioque in the creed, and all of the Eastern Orthodox should be able to come back into communion with the church, because they don't have to recite the Filioque.
So this guy just flashed a few quotes from saints, and I actually have a recent clip that's on my Instagram and TikTok where I actually talk about the creed and it being added.
This is where Orthodox go way wrong, and they don't actually understand the history of this issue. Okay, the Council of Ephesus in 431 is the council that said you can't add anything to the creed. But here's the problem: the creed that they were referring to is not the creed that we all recite on Sundays during worship. The Council of Ephesus was referring to the creed from Nicaea. None of us recite that creed anymore. We all recite the creed from Constantinople. So Ephesus was referring to Nicaea, but we all recite from Constantinople. And Constantinople, which happened before Ephesus, did add to the creed from Nicaea, and that's the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed that we all recite. What they don't understand is that we did add to the creed because Constantinople I in 381, that council, when it first happened, it wasn't an ecumenical council. It was only a local council. It was a synod. And it wasn't until the Council of Chalcedon in 451 that they elevated Constantinople 381 to the status of ecumenical. And when they did that, the Council of Chalcedon adopted the creed from Constantinople I, and that's the creed that we've been using since Chalcedon to the present day, the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed. So they don't understand that when they say, oh, the church said you can't add to the creed, you say, well, we did add to the creed, East and West, and we recite those additions to the creed. Both of us do, every single Sunday. They can't reconcile that. They'll say, oh, the creed has to be left as is. It wasn't. They did add to the creed, even before the Council of Ephesus had said that, because Constantinople I in 381 had not yet been elevated to the status of ecumenical yet. So they're just wrong. They're just wrong about it.
Yeah, everything that he just presented here of quotes from those saints, it actually doesn't work. So Photius actually is the very first one to ever make a big deal out of the Filioque, but Photius came back into communion with the Catholic Church before he died, with the Filioquus West. So it wasn't that big of a deal for him, because he came back into communion, and he died in communion, and he's venerated as a Catholic saint.
600 years, no one ever batted an eye. It was never an issue. So if they were able to go 600 years without it being controversial, the Latins should be able to keep the Filioque in the creed, and all of the Eastern Orthodox should be able to come back into communion with the church, because they don't have to recite the Filioque. You just can't say it's heresy, and it shouldn't be an issue.
So he's saying that the Filioque is a heresy. Well, what I said in that clip stands. If it's a heresy, why didn't any of the Eastern saints ever say anything about it for almost 600 years after it was added in the West and before the schism happened? And why is it that so many of the Eastern saints actually taught the Filioque and actually believed the Filioque? Why didn't the Eastern Christians ever say anything about it? Why was Photius the very first one, again in the 9th century, and then he recanted and he came back into communion with the Filioquist West? It just doesn't make sense, because the Filioque isn't a heresy. If it was a heresy, the schism would have happened back when it was added to the creed originally. But that's not what happened. So, no, it's not a heresy. And actually, a lot of Eastern Orthodox would even say that the Filioque isn't a heresy. So, I don't know what the point of this clip was. It didn't really prove anything. Yeah, submit to Rome.